Oh, all right. Welcome to today's call.
Welcome to today's call. We're talking about food choices and the obstacles behind them. Got to share a screen.
Yeah. There you go.
All right. Welcome to the food choices you make and how they impact and freaking shoot obstacles in our way, right? I mean, ultimately. So when it comes to sticking to a plan, it's your choice. You didn't know that. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't, but it's your choice. There's really no right or wrong decision at all. It's just a choice.
There is no cheats. There is no going off. It's just, hey, look, I made a decision and life.
I'm living with it. And so obviously you make a decision and it comes with consequences, and consequences, these can be either good or bad, but ultimately they're moving us either toward or away from our goal. Your food choices are also up to you. I'm not here to give you a designated meal plan. Maybe I can give you like a list of foods to choose from, but ultimately it's up to you. Because if I was to tell you, you got to eat chicken every day and you're a pescatarian, you're probably not going to follow it, right? Or you're going to hate me forever.
And then if and when you learn how to make choices that move you towards your goal at a rate that you're happy with, it gives you the control to be able to pick, to choose, to move a little bit more freely. Obviously, doing what you're told works for an extended period of time or a short amount of time. But when you get to a place where it's like, hey, I'd like something different, you want to make sure that you're empowered to be able to make choices that you enjoy and that move you forward, so that you don't necessarily feel restrained or restricted by just following directions.
Exactly. And the food choices that you make, they definitely play a factor, kind of what we're leading into right now, into your adherence or to sticking with a plan, or maybe like a lack of adherence or falling off plan, falling off the wagon, however you want to say it, right? But let's talk about food choices and the effects. So how do they affect us? So when it comes to food choices, they're dependent upon a couple things. First, where are you currently at in your journey? Are you in a fat loss phase, maintenance? Are you building? So where are you at is going to be dependent on your food choices, or vice versa, I should say. Your likes and dislikes, kind of what we just described. Your environment. Who do you live with? What do you have access to? Are you in, a food desert? Stress levels, are you super high, maybe high stress? Some people tend to just eat and eat and eat. Some people tend to not overconsume and don't eat whatsoever. Are your stress levels low? Like, where are those playing a factor? That's going to make an impact on the choices that you make when it comes to food. Social life. Do you go out to eat a lot? Do you not go out at all? Do you go visiting friends? And your level of preparedness. How prepared are you? Do you have a plan of what it is you're going to eat, when you're going to eat? Do you prep your meals ahead of time? Level of preparedness definitely makes an impact in regards to the choices that you make when it comes to food. Now, how do the food choices affect you before, during, and then after eating? So you have some emotional and mental effects of the food choices that you're making. And what do we mean? So for instance, we're talking about like, do you enjoy the foods that you're actually eating? Do you hate the foods? Are you just really bored of the freaking foods that you chose?
We had one person that we worked with back in the day used to overcook the shit out of chicken, and would have to put so much sauce to try and choke it down. You could just see the misery in his face while he's eating it. It's like what? Like, why don't you do something better, cook it differently, or do something that you enjoy? It's like, oh, because this is what it takes to get results. It's like, no, like you can enjoy the food that you eat that also gives you a result. That way you aren't choking on this and wishing it was a California burrito.
Yeah. I mean, and do you like variety in your meals? Are you more simplistic? Can you eat the same thing every single day? Maybe you do enjoy variety, but you're eating the same thing every day. And so like emotionally, like, I'm so freaking sick of this, right?
And sometimes too much variety can also cause complexity. It's like, oh, I like variety, but then if you're stressing about how you can mix it up, that may not be the best thing. So it's like, seems like a lot to juggle, but the reality is that like managing all of these things is key for success.
And that's definitely like, I like variety, but I usually have the time to incorporate that. And so that kind of brings us down to our point of Is your brain to capacity? Are you just thinking all of the time, like, what am I going to eat? What am I going to eat? So are you doing too much planning? Are you doing not enough planning? So there's both coins or sides to that coin, right? Same thing when it comes to emotionally and mentally. Do you eat a particular food and regret eating it? Do you feel accomplished? So you can see how all of these different choices that we make with regards to food, like, affect us emotionally and physically. Like, before, we're thinking about the food. During, we're thinking, are we enjoying the food? Do we hate the food? Even after, like, oh, am I regretting it? Or am I excited? Was I happy with the decision I made? So, like, it literally encompasses our whole life, right? And then let's talk about physical, because obviously food is fuel. Yes, it tastes good, and it's more than just fuel. But when it comes to how it makes us physically, are we hungry? Like, after we've eaten a meal, are we still ravenous? Are we satisfied? So thinking about, are you consuming calorically dense meals? Are you consuming meals that are low in calories versus calorically dense, which is high in calories? How big are your meals? Are they small in size? Are they big in size? Are you drinking most of your calories? Are you eating most of your calories? How often? What's your frequency of meals? Do you fast most of the day and then have like 1 or 2 large meals in the evening? Are you eating like 5 meals throughout the day? What is the actual, we'll say, meal makeup? Like, do you have a lot of protein? Do you have a lot of carbs? Do you have a lot of fats? Like, what does that look like? And then also, when it comes physically, what are the actual food effects? So when you are fueling your body with the different types of foods that you have, is the food that you're fueling it with, or the food choices that you're making, are they making you feel sluggish? Are they making you feel energized? So for instance, we love brisket. We love brisket.
And beef ribs.
And beef ribs.
Very similar.
There's definitely things like that we love and are worth any physical effects that we may encounter afterwards. So if we were to give an example like brisket, like, oh, there's a lot of fat in brisket, but it tastes so good, right? But this man, if he eats too much, like, his heart rate shoots through the roof.
You can see it on my little like wearables.
Yeah.
Like, oh, careful.
But so like knowing those types of things, like, how are you actually feeling? That makes a difference as well. Are you constipated? Are you one of those people who, if you eat too much cheese, you get constipated? Maybe the opposite, where you have some runs and diarrhea. Does your body feel inflamed? So obviously food choices, they affect us physically, they affect us mentally, and emotionally. Let's talk about navigating the obstacles behind these food choices. For instance, are you bored? What do we mean? So boredom, it could be, let's first focus on the emotional boredom, the mental boredom. So if you're feeling bored with your food choices, switch it up.
And I think this is more like bored with the food, like it's not exciting, versus like you're just sitting around bored at the house, so you want to snack. Like, that obviously plays a factor as well. But for here, we're like, is your food not exciting?
Yeah.
Boring food.
For sure. And so, like, ways that you can help, like, if you find that you're falling off plan from your food choices when it comes to boredom, then switch it up. Change your food sources, even if it's like a different meat source or a different veggie source or whatever.
Or just different spices.
Yeah. Spice it up differently.
Yeah, the same ingredients spiced differently can be a completely fresh spin on the same or similar ingredients.
Or the way that you cook it. If you're like barbecue versus baking, sauteing versus broiling, like all of these different ways. There's so many things that you could do, even like using an Instapot. I mean, the options are endless. Okay. Another way that you can switch it up is if you are a person who's like, oh my God, I'm so sick of eating the same shit over and over again, then what you can do, where it doesn't take up so much mental capacity, is plan a variety meal. And so for instance, you basically, like, you have one variety meal in your day, like let's say dinner. Most people tend to be able to sit down to eat dinner. And so you have maybe 2 or 3 staple meals that you eat every day throughout the week. And then when it comes to dinner each day, maybe it's, we'll be traditional. Taco Tuesday, Waffle Wednesday, whatever you want it to be. But that way it allows you a little bit of variety. And if you have 2 to 3, we'll say, variety meals during the week, sometimes that's enough of a switch up to keep you on plan and to give you something to look forward to as well.
And sometimes having those variety meals, or like having staple meals around those variety meals, can help.
For sure. Maybe, you need to incorporate a date night, whether that's at home or whether that's going out. Maybe you're just so bored of eating at home and you haven't given yourself the permission to, like, I need to just go out and I want someone else to do the cooking. So planning a date night can help with things like that, whether that's by yourself or with a loved one.
It's also just a really good pattern to interrupt, because sometimes as humans, we can get so head down focused on what we're doing. So if you feel like all you're doing is like working, coming home, prepping for this or doing that, it can be very tiring. And so even if date night is just at the house or you go out, it is a really nice change of pace. So that way you can take a moment, stop, and actually enjoy your life, just versus like feeling like all you're doing is working or planning or working out or all of those things.
Yeah. Another thing, like when it comes to boredom, do you have calorie-free activities? So like if you're legit bored, like I'm just bored, and it's one of those things like I'm just bored, so I'm hungry and I just want to eat.
Let's see what's in the fridge this time.
Yeah. So the question becomes, if you didn't have food, what would you do? What would you do if you're like, I can't eat, I have access to no food? And so this is where it would be list 3 other activities that you can do if you didn't have access to food. So if you're feeling bored, what are 3 things you can do? You can go for a walk, maybe get a workout in, maybe you can read, maybe you can watch TV, you can color. Doing something other than eating can help allow you to stay on plan, we'll say. All right, next question. Are you hungry? Or at obstacle, we'll say. Are you hungry? And this, once again, can be emotionally, it can be, physically, it can be mentally. And so one of the things that you want to do is identify, when are you most hungry? Is it in the morning? Is it in the evening? Is it something that's like a habit where, and maybe in the evening you always have a certain drink or a treat or whatever it is. Yeah, that's how you unwind. And so ways that you can help with that would be like actually plan a treat or have some calorie-free activities to help with it, right?
Or thinking about, because sometimes what ends up happening is like maybe during the work day, you're so head down focused, you've neglected to eat. And then when you get home, like your willpower is so low and you're just like, oh, I just want to eat anything because I haven't eaten all day. Most of the time people have consumed calories before then. They just don't acknowledge them because they're moving around, running around. It's something quick, easy, fast. But like maybe if when you get home, things are really hard, there's something that you can do earlier in the day to set your evening up for success, as well as having some type of plan for when you get home and having a way to be able to decompress, whether it's calorie free or calories included, what that looks like. But sometimes it starts before that activity. So if it's like, all right, cool, this is normally when I'm very hungry or that I'm triggered, you can obviously fix that situation. But sometimes taking a step back and looking at the actual problem, not just the symptom, then that'll help with long-term success.
And so also that plays into the whole like replacing old rituals with new rituals. Mm-hmm. So if it's something that it's like, oh, like I always eat a very heavy calorie treat in the evening, and you're like, well, I'm trying to get into a fat loss here, that's probably not serving my goals. What can I do? Can I change it to maybe so that it's not so hefty on the calories? Can I calorie cycle? What can I do in order to be able to still enjoy my treat or do something else besides eat, right? And then also ask yourself, like, if you are hungry, what phase are you in? Are you in fat loss? Are you building? Are you maintaining? And how aggressive are you being? So we will tell you, unfortunately, like when you're in a fat loss phase, chances are you're going to be hungry. But depending on how hungry you are, like if you are ravenous, maybe you're being too aggressive with what it is that you are doing.
And with the fat loss phase or goal, there is a really like thin line between suffering for the sake of suffering and actually getting increased results. There's so many people that would go to extreme lengths and there's no real benefit. So it's like you could be in a deficit or in a cut and make really good progress. And then if you restrict calories a little bit more, the feeling of hunger is going to go through the roof times 10, but it's not like you're going to lose 10 times as much weight. So like there is a tipping point where it's like the effort that you're putting in won't yield the same return. And so finding that sweet spot for yourself is different for everyone, but it is very important to realize like, all right, cool, am I suffering for no reason? Or am I okay with the benefit that I'm getting because of what I'm putting in right now?
Yeah. Continuing on this trend. So for instance, taking a look at like, what are the food choices that you're actually making? Are you getting the minimum amount of protein that you should be getting? Protein is very satiating macronutrient. and it helps with muscle building, maintaining muscle, and so many other things. Check out the protein video. Also, how much fiber are you eating? That's really also going to help with satiation. So if you're not getting enough protein, maybe you need to increase it. Maybe you're not getting enough fiber. Maybe you need to increase both of them. Just make sure you increase your water intake with it as well. Nobody wants to be constipated around here. I'll tell you that. How are you consuming your foods? Are you drinking a whole bunch of protein shakes? Like, that would piss me off. That would make me hungry. Are you sitting down and eating your foods? So changing, maybe if you're doing too many shakes or too many liquid style meals, then change it to being able to like consume something. Volume and number of meals. So how many meals are you eating throughout the day, and how big are your actual meals? So if you're a person who's been eating, like 5 meals throughout the day, they're probably a lot smaller in size, depending on what your goals are. We're going to use fat loss because that's what the majority of us typically tend to focus on, fat loss or maintenance. And so with that, if you're having a whole bunch of smaller calorie meals spread throughout the day, like that might be what's pissing you off.
And sometimes like there's a lot of people, it's like, oh, like eating that frequent is good. And it's not good or bad, but at the same time, like if you're eating small meals all the time, then you may never get fully, we'll say, ahead of the hunger, right? So like you can feel like you're eating all the time, but you're never satisfied. And so sometimes having less meals that are bigger, so you feel satiated, and you can actually start to learn, oh, this is what satisfied feels like, this is what hunger feels like. And you get to sit down and enjoy a bigger meal if that's something that you're into, right? Or if you don't like bigger meals, then maybe you can enjoy something that's a little bit more calorically dense without putting yourself in a weird spot because you aren't eating 4, 5, 6, 7 meals.
Yeah. Same thing. Checking to see like, what are your food sources? Are you eating the smaller meals? Like, how are they broken up? Are like zucchini? Some of my favorite, will say, lower calorie ones, but pack a punch when it comes to volume and filling up your stomach would be like bok choy, zucchini, cucumbers, celery, tomatoes, onions, like the list goes on. Green leafy veggies. So maybe adding some of those into your intake will definitely help. Also, it's going to help bump up some of that fiber content, which will then help to increase that satisfaction and satiation. All right, continuing on with these. What does your distribution look like when it comes to, how you're consuming your macronutrients throughout the day and how you're consuming your calories throughout the day? So for instance, do you have, is each meal pretty evenly distributed when it comes to having a balanced amount of protein in each meal? Do you tend to consume all your carbs in the morning, and then now all you have is like protein and fats in the afternoon and evening? And so playing around and changing it up to maybe being more of an even distribution. Same thing like when it comes to calories, like do you pack a whole bunch of your calories in the morning? Do you pack them in the evening? Where are all your calories loaded? Because if you're a person who saves a lot of your calories towards the evening, like you're probably going to be hungry during the beginning of the day. So changing it up to see like, okay, maybe I do enjoy fasting in the morning, but I break my fast. Everybody breaks their fast, I'll tell you that right now, with a smaller meal. Or I make sure that I have protein, like at least 30 grams of protein in each of my meal sittings, so that I'm getting that satiating effect of protein and also playing on our muscle protein synthesis to help with building.
And even like just even distribution across the board isn't always the answer. Sometimes if your day is broken up where you have you need more energy or focus, maybe stacking more food around that so you can perform better.
Yes.
And then other times of the day where you don't necessarily need it, if you are lower calories, no big deal. And that typically plays a heavier factor if you're if you're in a cut where it's like, hey, cool, my meals are smaller, so I'll have a bigger one either around training or around focus time at work. So that way your mental clarity is where it needs to be, or your drive in training is where it needs to be. And then other times of day when maybe you're relaxing a little bit, or you're after work or things like that, you can have lower calorie because you're not going to need the energy to focus or to move around.
Definitely. Do you go out a lot?
Uh-oh.
Are you an eater outer eater, however you want to say it? We are definitely the eater outer people. I will tell you that right now. So when it comes to eating meals out and social outings, we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. Let's talk about your environment. So when you are eating, Are you sitting and eating? Are you standing and eating? Are you talking and eating? What are you doing when you're eating? Because if you're one of those people, like as he said, like, oh, I don't eat a lot throughout the day, because you're snacking all the time and you're standing and doing other things as you're eating, you're not going to be very full or even aware that you're actually eating. And so taking a moment to sit down and to focus on those meals, or save the time that you're going to be able to sit down, like save that so that you can focus on the actual meal. So like, sorry, let me put that back. The meals that you want to focus on, sit down and eat them so that you can actually enjoy them and focus on it and register that you're actually eating.
And because it'll allow you to be a little bit more responsible later. Because a lot of times, if you are like, I think a lot of times that the association with not eating all day is just being on the go. It's like, I'm nonstop all day. It doesn't necessarily mean you haven't consumed calories, you haven't eaten. I just mean that you've been going nonstop, right? And so like if you do take a second to like, focus, fantastic. Then later on in the evening, you won't justify overeating because you've been going nonstop all day. You'll realize, oh, I did take the time. Or if you are going nonstop, then fine, fast and then have a little bit more calories in the afternoon.
Yeah. When it comes to, like how frequently are you going out to eat? Are you going out to eat all the time that it's causing you to fall off plan? So maybe you're going out too much, or you don't have a plan when you're going out. You're not factoring that in. Maybe you need to decrease the amount that you're going out, or create a plan for when you do go out, what you're going to do. Maybe you're not going out at all and you're freaking bored. And so you need to incorporate some type of, once again, like variety or something. Calorie cycling is one of those things that we love and definitely incorporate ourselves. And what we mean by that is we reserve usually about like 2 higher calorie days for the days where we want to go out to a restaurant and eat. Obviously, you don't have to do that. But it allows us to enjoy more food when we want to enjoy more food. And then we're lower calorie usually throughout the week when we maybe don't need as many calories, or we feel okay consuming less calories because we're looking forward to our weekend out or whatever that is. And then, when it comes to going out to eat, like, do you have a regular place that you go? I know that we have a lot of regulars. There's a lot of people who go where it's like, oh, I always go to Chipotle, or I always go to Cheesecake Factory. I always go wherever it is that you go.
And even if it's not the same restaurant, most people have a style where it's like, oh, they always go out for burgers, or they always go out for pizza. So maybe it's a different pizza spot, or maybe it's a different burger spot. Or maybe it's a spot that, doesn't specialize in something, but then they get the burger anyways.
Yes.
So it's like, you probably have something that you gravitate towards.
And so if you have that thing that you traditionally gravitate towards, you can reserve a certain amount of calories for when you go out on those days. Or if you do it on the regular, like having, once again, like a staple meal, like, oh, when I go to a steakhouse, I always order, steak and veggies. And then I enjoy the bread basket, or whatever that looks like for you. But if you have a similar way of ordering, then it gives you at least a little bit of structure when you go out, and you can continue going out and enjoying the things and seeing how you're progressing with that. The other thing that we kind of touched upon before when it comes to meals out is, how are you setting up the rest of your days, and the rest of the day and days during that week? Are you reserving a whole bunch of calories in the evening? Are you getting enough protein during the day to make sure that you're hitting your protein minimums? Maybe, which is one thing that we actually love, because we do like to, like when we go out, I will tell you right now, we do like to eat a higher amount of calories when we go out. It varies, but for the most part, we like to eat a higher amount of calories. And so with that, we typically reserve a higher number of calories. And I will tell you that it's much higher, or much harder to reserve a higher number of calories for dinner than it is for lunch. Because if you start changing it up where it's like, oh, I do my brunchy thing, then you have a majority of your calories in the middle of the day. And usually for most people, when they have that, then it's like, oh God, I don't need to eat anything else the rest of the day.
And even if they didn't go hard, it's not like, it's one of those things where it just makes quality of life better. If you're having most of your calories in a single meal, having it in the middle of the day, that makes the most sense. Because if you have it super early, then you may be really hungry later, and then put yourself in a weird spot. Or if you do like the old school traditional, like, Thanksgiving, I'm not going to eat until dinner, and then you eat like a jackass at dinner, or the whole day is miserable. Because you're looking forward to it. So sometimes like having it be a little bit earlier, like, between lunch and an early dinner, is, at least for us, the perfect middle ground. So it's like, all right, cool. In the morning, if I'm a little bit hungry, no big deal, I'll eat. And then in the afternoon or evening, it's not going to be so much time that I feel like, oh my God, I'm going to chew my hand off.
Yeah. The other really important factor when it comes to social outings is if you have people that are like, oh, let's go out, let's go out. And like, that's all you do, like, and you enjoy it, great. But if you're trying to accomplish a goal and the people that you're surrounding yourself with don't know that, then they don't know how that they can support you. And they don't know if they like you going out is causing you to fall off plan. And so talking with them and saying, like, hey, like, this is my goal. This is how you can support me, and letting them know, as well as like even saying, hey, do you mind if I pick where we go? And then you have control and agency over what that is. Or maybe you host and then you, once again, have control and agency into the food choices that you are having.
So yeah, just take ownership. Don't blame it on your friends because they want to go out. You don't have to go. Or you can say,
You
hey,
don't.
let's go to this place.
This is true. This is true. The options are endless. You just have to allow them to come to fruition. And ultimately, it boils down to reflecting on your current situation and then identifying what's actually causing you to fall off. Are you hungry? Are you bored? Are you going in a lot of social situations? Create a plan, test the plan, reflect on the plan that you executed, make some changes if you need to, and then the cycle repeats. And I don't mean the cycle of like, I fall off my plan. It's I continue to perfect the plan.
It's more of an evolution cycle,
Yes.
right? So it's like, oh, you tried something, it worked, and you lean into what works more and more moving forward versus being like, oh, let me just try the plan that failed last time. Because
No.
like realistically, any plan that you come up with probably won't work the very first time, or it won't work every single time. So it's like, all right, cool. I tried this. This is what worked. How can I get better? How can I get better? And every time, you just add more tools to your tool belt. So every time you face that situation, you just get better and better at handling it. And you're always in control.
But in conclusion, identify what's causing you to fall off plan when it comes to the food choices that you're making. Are you hungry? Are you bored? Do you go out to a lot of social outings? And identifying like within those, what's actually causing you. So if you're hungry and you're not eating enough protein, increase your protein. See how you feel. Test the plan. Reflect. Did that satiate me and make me satisfied? If it didn't, make a couple changes. Maybe you need to add some fiber. You get the gist of it. But basically, repeat, identify what's causing you to fall off. It's okay. We all have oopsies, and it's about learning from our oopsies. All right. We had a couple questions that we wanted to address. First question was, let's do, no, we'll do that one. Sure. But, was about training. And so the question was ultimately like, hey, I've been training for a while. How do I know when to increase things? And is it like
to change it up?
To
Right?
change, like, do I increase my sets? Do I increase my reps? Do I increase my weight? Like, how do I progress with it when it comes to the workouts?
Yeah. And so like one of the things, at least for us, is like, if you have a really good workout that you love, there's no point in completely overhauling the entire thing, because like building like mastery comes with doing things over and over again. So like if you have those things that work really well for you, the best way to do it is to stick with that, but then change the way that you're doing that thing. So it would be modifying sets, reps, or increasing your weight, or a little bit of all of the above. I would typically suggest doing one thing at a time and seeing how you like it and sticking with that. So every once in a while, it's like, hey, if you want to make a change, add an additional set, do the same rep scheme, just one additional set. Or you can keep the same amount of sets and then just add a few reps to each set. And then obviously, depending on how you're doing that, the weights would change.
So if I was to give, we'll say, an example of when you should know you should progress. Let's say you've been doing 3 sets of 12 reps and we're doing squats, okay? And you've been doing squats, 3 sets of 12 reps, and you're at 55 pounds. I'm just throwing out numbers here. And you're at 55 pounds. And so you've been doing 55 pounds for 3 sets of 12, and you've been doing it for a while. So ultimately, every single week, the goal should be, if you're sticking to that same rep scheme, increase it by 2.5, increase it by 5. So whatever you started with the previous week. So if you were at 55 pounds on your final set, that could be your warm-up set, or that could be your second set. So then that way, the third set or the second set is an increased weight. So rather than doing 55 pounds, you would be doing 60 pounds or 57 and a half or whatever that is. But if you find that you're at the top end of each set, then you should be increasing your weights so that you ultimately can't continue to get that 12 reps. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. So you should, like she said, if it's like, all right, cool. If you're pushing for 10 to 12, you shouldn't necessarily be able to do 12 every single set.
Yeah. So that means you need to increase your weight so that you're like, okay, I'm getting now 10 reps of 60 pounds. And then when you continue to like, okay, I'm getting 10 reps of 60 pounds. Now let me try to get to 12 reps of 60 pounds. And then once you get to the top end of that set, then do it again. Then you go and you're like, okay, now I do 65 pounds at 10 reps or whatever it is.
And sometimes for me, the way that I do it works really well is realistically picking a weight at the first set. If I push, I can hit the end of the rep range. So if it's like, if I'm shooting for 15, the first one I can get 15, but then the second set, like no way I'll get 15. So it's like, maybe it's like 15, then it's like, 13 or 14, then it's like 12. And so like the weight stays the same, but the amount of reps that I complete each set diminishes because I'm pushing hard each round.
And so like with that, then you would try to build to utilize that same weight to max out that rep scheme every single time. And then once you've maxed out that rep scheme, then you can bump up the weight again. Hopefully that answers your question.
But short, like if you like, you should always be working hard. Like if you're going in there and it's like, oh, you're grabbing the same weight all the time, you're just going through the motions, and maybe time to grab a heavier weight or add an additional set or a few reps. That way, like you're always working, and you're going in there after that work versus just looking for getting the blood flow and getting a good pump. Because like you can stick with the same weight all the time and still feel very productive because like, oh, it feels really good to move around. You got a nice little pump, all great. But if you don't necessarily feel like you're working hard, then you may need to bump it up.
Next question, we are going to share our screen. And it was about the Fit Foodie lifestyle tracker. So we did update it a little bit. You can download it, and then soon we'll have our app, which will have everything all integrated. So be on the lookout. But anyways, here's the Fit Foodie lifestyle tracker. You may or may not have seen this before. I've actually changed up some of these ratings for the week, so check it out. But the question came down to over here. There's a cardio section, there's a weight training section. Obviously, some people fill the entirety of this out, some people don't. It just depends on what your goals are and what you're looking to do. Not everybody does cardio. Not everybody does weight training, right? So when it comes to cardio, what do you write? Like you can just write like, oh, 30-minute elliptical, or I would put the amount of minutes that you did X amount of activity. And then when it comes to weight training, like what we typically do is like upper body, lower body, or whatever it is.
So we just put the targeted muscle group. So if it's like upper body, great. If it's like back specific, then great. So designate the the area that you targeted for weight training, and if it's cardio, just put the duration of time that you did it, and then maybe the activity that you did as well. So it's like a run versus an elliptical or a ruck or like whatever, because this would be a little bit different.
We don't traditionally or include any type of time when it comes to weight training because we do the same training routine, and so it takes the same amount of time. And like time doesn't always necessarily play a factor when it comes to weight training, but like when it comes to cardio, it'll definitely.
Yeah, if you're lifting weights, it's more about intensity versus duration. So it's like, oh, if I'm lifting this much weight,
yeah,
that's more relevant than I lifted for this amount of time, unless you're doing some type of like Tabata or timed exercise, but still.
Yes. But those were all the questions that we had for today. If you have any burning questions, make sure to submit them so that we can answer them on this call, and we will see you next week.